The scent of burning sage and amber incense coiled through the air like hungry serpents, clinging to the walls of our modest cottage at the edge of the pack territory. Outside, twilight bled across the sky in shades of violet and crimson. Inside, my stepmother's fingers dug into my shoulders as she shoved me toward the hidden cellar door beneath the worn kitchen rug. "You will stay down there until the mating ceremony is over," she hissed, her voice carrying the same venom I'd grown accustomed to over the last decade. "Not a sound, Alara. Do you understand me?" I nodded, throat tight with unspoken protests. My pale blonde hair, the color of winter moonlight, so unlike the dark tresses that ran through my stepmother's bloodline, fell across my face as I was pushed toward the narrow wooden steps descending into darkness. "Your father should never have brought you into this pack," she continued, her words cutting deeper than claws ever could. "A half-blood with no wolf to speak of. What use are you at a mating ceremony? You'd only embarrass us all." The familiar weight of shame pressed against my chest. I'd heard these words in various forms since I was 7, when my father had brought his new bride home after my mother's death. A death that, according to pack whispers, had been the mercy of the moon goddess, taking a human woman who dared to love a wolf shifter. "The Alpha King and his entourage will be here by midnight. Every unmated female of age will be presented." Her lips curled into a smirk. "Except you, of course. The king has no use for broken things." As she slammed the cellar door, plunging me into darkness, my fingers instinctively reached for the silver pendant hanging at my throat. My mother's last gift. Its surface was worn smooth from years of anxious touching, the crescent moon design barely visible now. In the darkness, I whispered my mother's words back to myself. "The moon shines equally on all creatures, Alara. Never forget that you belong beneath its light as much as anyone." The sound of movement above told me my stepmother and stepsister Mara were preparing for the ceremony. Mara was everything I wasn't, pure-blooded, wolf-strong, and darkly beautiful. She'd spent weeks preparing for this night, convinced the Alpha King would choose her as his mate. Hours passed in the damp cellar, with only the scurrying of mice and my racing thoughts for company. The distant sounds of ceremonial drums began to pulse through the ground, vibrating against my skin. The mating ceremony had begun. I wasn't supposed to know much about the ritual. It wasn't for my kind. But servants talked, and I listened. The Alpha King, ruler of all 5 regional packs, traveled every decade to select a mate. The chosen female would become queen, her pack elevated to royal status. For my stepmother, having Mara chosen would mean wealth, power, and revenge against those who'd mocked her for marrying a widower with a half-human daughter. As the drums grew louder, curiosity overcame caution. I crept up the cellar steps and pressed my ear against the thin wooden door. The cottage was empty. They'd gone to the ceremonial clearing in the center of our territory. Something pulled at me then, an inexplicable force like moonlight tugging at ocean tides. Before I could think better of it, I pushed open the cellar door and emerged into the silent cottage. The scent of the forest at night, pine, earth, and something wilder, called to me through the open window. I moved toward it as if in a trance, my pale blue dress, Mara's cast-off from last season, catching on a chair corner and tearing slightly. It hardly mattered. No one would see me anyway. I slipped out the back door and into the embrace of the forest. The ceremonial clearing was nearly a mile away, but the drums guided me, as did the trails of torchlight through the trees. I stayed in the shadows, instinct warning me to remain hidden, even as that strange pull urged me forward. The clearing appeared before me, transformed from its usual mundane state into something mythical. Hundreds of torches formed a perfect circle around its perimeter. Inside, pack members stood in concentric rings according to rank, with the unmated females forming the innermost circle. At the center stood a massive stone altar, ancient and weathered, upon which a tall figure stood surveying the gathering. Even from the edge of the forest, I could feel his presence like a physical force, the Alpha King. Power emanated from him in waves that seemed to bend the very air. His back was to me, but I could see broad shoulders beneath a cloak of deepest black, his hair the color of midnight, gleaming in the firelight. One by one, The unmated females approached the altar, each hoping to be the one who stirred the alpha's interest. Some were beautiful, others powerful, all desperate for his attention. I spotted Mara in her crimson dress, her dark hair elaborately styled, her chin lifted with the arrogance she'd inherited from her mother. I should have turned back then, should have returned to the cellar before my absence was discovered. But that pull, stronger now, almost painful in its intensity, kept me rooted to the spot, half hidden behind an ancient oak at the clearing's edge. The Alpha King moved with preternatural grace, his movements fluid yet contained, like a predator conserving energy before a strike. He said little as each female presented herself, only occasionally asking a question in a voice too low for me to hear from my hiding place. None seemed to capture his interest for more than a moment. When Mara's turn came, a hush fell over the crowd. She was, objectively, the most beautiful candidate our pack had to offer. My stepmother's face glowed with anticipation as Mara climbed the steps to the altar, her movements deliberately sensual. The Alpha King turned fully toward her, and though I couldn't see his face, something in his posture suggested mild interest. They exchanged words, and Mara's laughter, practiced to perfection, floated across the clearing. My chest tightened with an emotion I refused to name. Not jealousy. Never that. I had no right to feel jealous over something that could never be mine. As I shifted my weight, a twig snapped beneath my foot. The sound was small, infinitesimal against the backdrop of drums and conversation, but the Alpha King's head snapped up instantly, his attention diverted from Mara. He scanned the trees with predatory focus, and when his gaze locked onto my hiding place, time itself seemed to freeze. I couldn't see his eyes clearly from this distance, but I felt them, burning into me, through me, awakening something dormant in my blood. The pull I'd felt earlier intensified tenfold, stealing my breath. My mother's pendant grew warm against my skin, almost hot enough to burn. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to obey. The Alpha King moved so quickly that the motion blurred. One moment he stood on the altar with Mara. The next, he was striding toward the forest's edge, toward me. The crowd parted before him in waves of confusion and whispered speculation. Who hides in shadows on this sacred night? His voice carried across the distance between us, deep and resonant, laced with power that made my knees weaken. Show yourself. It wasn't a request. It was a command that reverberated through my bones. Before I could think better of it, I stepped from behind the oak tree into the torchlight, my pale hair catching the golden glow. A collective gasp rose from the gathering. My stepmother's face contorted with rage and horror. Mara, still on the altar, looked as though she might faint. The Alpha King stood perfectly still, his face finally visible to me. He was younger than I'd expected, perhaps 30, with features that seemed carved from stone by an artist obsessed with perfection. High cheekbones, a strong jaw dusted with dark stubble, and eyes the color of Arctic ice, so pale blue they appeared almost white in the firelight. Those eyes widened almost imperceptibly as they took me in, and something shifted in their glacial depths, something that looked dangerously like recognition. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice softer now but no less commanding. "Ilara," I whispered, then cleared my throat and repeated more firmly. "My name is Ilara. She's nobody." My stepmother's voice cut through the silence as she pushed her way forward. "A half-blood. My husband's mistake from a previous marriage." She wasn't invited to the ceremony. The Alpha King didn't even glance in her direction. His eyes remained fixed on mine as though he'd found something long lost. "A half-blood," he repeated thoughtfully. "Human and wolf." It wasn't a question. I nodded, my cheeks burning with shame. "I shouldn't be here. I'll go." As I turned to retreat into the forest, his voice stopped me. "Stay." Again, that single word resonated through me like the toll of a bell. My feet refused to move. He approached slowly, each step deliberate, until he stood close enough that I could smell his scent. Mountain air after a lightning storm, wild and dangerous and intoxicating. Up close, I could see a scar running from his right temple to his jaw, a white line against tanned skin that somehow only enhanced his beauty. "You have no wolf?" he asked, circling me with predatory grace. "No, Alpha King. I'm broken, as they say." The words tasted bitter on my tongue. "Interesting." He stopped directly before me, looming tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "And yet you felt the call of the ceremony. You came, despite being forbidden." My stepmother moved forward again. "Your Majesty, please forgive this intrusion. The girl is simple, doesn't understand our ways." Silence. He didn't raise his voice, didn't even look at her, but the single word carried such authority that she immediately fell quiet. "I am speaking with Alara." The way he said my name, like he was tasting it, sent a shiver down my spine. I felt something, I admitted, unable to lie beneath that penetrating gaze. "A pull." Interest flickered in his eyes. "Did you now?" He reached out, his movement careful as though approaching a wild animal, and lifted the silver pendant from where it rested against my collarbone. His fingers brushed my skin, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. "Where did you get this?" he asked, studying the crescent moon design. "It was my mother's." A murmur went through the crowd, but I kept my focus on the Alpha King's face, watching as various emotions flickered across it too quickly to interpret. "Do you know what tonight is, Alara, besides the mating ceremony?" I shook my head. "The blood moon rising. Once every century, the moon turns red, and old magic awakens." His eyes lifted to the sky, where the full moon hung like a perfect pearl. "By midnight, it will begin to change color. Ancient things stir on such nights. Fates align." His gaze returned to mine, intense and searching. "Nothing happens by accident during a blood moon." Before I could respond, he straightened to his full height and turned to address the stunned crowd. "The ceremony is concluded," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly across the clearing. Shocked silence followed his words, broken by my stepmother's outraged cry. "But you haven't selected a mate." The Alpha King's smile was cold. "Haven't I?" He turned back to me, and in one fluid motion, lifted my hand to his lips. The touch sent another shockwave through my system, stronger than before, causing my vision to briefly blur. "Ilara," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I claim you as mine under the witness of the coming blood moon." The forest erupted in chaos. My stepmother's scream of rage cut through the noise like a knife. Mara stumbled down from the altar, her face ashen, and through it all, the Alpha King's eyes never left mine, arctic and ancient and filled with secrets I couldn't begin to understand. "This is impossible," I whispered, trembling. "I'm not one of you. Not really." His smile shifted then, warming slightly at the edges. "You are exactly what I've been searching for," he said, his voice for my ears alone. "For longer than you could possibly imagine." As the moon began its slow transformation above us, turning the color of fresh blood, I felt my life changing just as dramatically, transforming from shadow to spotlight in the space of a single heartbeat. The whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire, a chorus of disbelief and speculation. I stood frozen, the Alpha King's claim echoing in my ears as the blood moon cast its first crimson shadows across the clearing. "This is an outrage!" My stepmother's voice cut through the murmurs, her face contorted with fury as she pushed forward. "Your Majesty, you can't possibly want her. She has no wolf, no strength. She's human." "Careful," the Alpha King interrupted, his voice soft but carrying a deadly edge that made even my stepmother falter. "You speak of my chosen mate." The title, mate, sent a shiver down my spine. This couldn't be real. Men like him didn't choose women like me. There had to be some mistake, some cruel joke or political calculation I didn't understand. "I don't even know your name," I whispered, the realization striking me suddenly. Something like amusement flickered in his pale eyes. "Evander," he said, the name rolling from his tongue like smoke. "Though most simply call me King." Evander. The name settled into me like a stone dropping into still water, creating ripples that spread through my consciousness. My stepmother wasn't finished. Her status, her carefully laid plans for Mara, were crumbling before her eyes. She's been hidden away her entire life for good reason, she spat. Ask her to shift. Go on. Ask her. She can't even access the most basic aspect of our nature. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Being unable to shift was considered the ultimate weakness among wolfkind. It was why I'd been hidden away. Why the pack children had tormented me. Why potential suitors had always looked past me. Evander's expression remained impassive as he turned to face me fully. Is this true? I lifted my chin despite the shame burning in my chest. Yes, I've never shifted. Have you tried? He asked, his question surprisingly gentle. Of course I've tried. The words came out sharper than intended, years of frustration behind them. Every full moon since I was 12. Nothing happens. No wolf answers. He studied me with those ancient eyes, then reached out to touch my mother's pendant again. Perhaps you've been calling to the wrong wolf. Before I could ask what he meant, he turned to address the gathered pack members. Return to your homes. The ceremony is complete. His tone left no room for argument. The beta of our pack, a grizzled man named Thorn who had served my father for years, approached cautiously. Your Majesty, there are traditions to be observed. The claiming must be followed by— I am well aware of the traditions, Beta Thorn. Evander cut him off. They will be honored in due time. For now, I wish to speak with my mate alone. My mate. Again, that title sent currents of disbelief through me. At least allow us to prepare her. My stepmother interjected desperately. She's not properly dressed for— She is perfect as she is, Evander stated with finality, his eyes flicking to my torn blue dress and back to my face. Leave us. Reluctantly, the crowd began to disperse. Mara shot me a look of pure hatred as my stepmother dragged her away, hissing promises of retribution that we both knew she could no longer fulfill. Not against the Alpha King's chosen. Soon, only Evander and I remained at the edge of the clearing, the torchlight casting long shadows across the forest floor. Above us, the moon continued its transformation, now glowing like burnished copper. You must have questions, he said, his voice softening once we were alone. Hundreds, I admitted. Starting with why? Why me? You could have chosen anyone. Mara is beautiful, pure-blooded, and entirely wrong for what I need. He began walking toward the center of the clearing, gesturing for me to follow. I hesitated only briefly before falling into step beside him. And what exactly do you need? He smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something breathtaking. Patience, Alara. Some answers must be earned rather than given. We reached the stone altar at the clearing's center. Up close, I could see ancient symbols carved into its surface, worn by centuries of weather but still visible in the moonlight. Do you know the history of your mother's pendant? He asked, changing the subject abruptly. I touched the silver crescent at my throat. Only that it was passed down through her family for generations. She made me promise never to remove it. Evander nodded as though this confirmed something. The blood moon comes once a century, but it hasn't aligned with the mating ceremony in over 500 years. He traced one of the symbols on the altar with long fingers. The last time it did, something extraordinary happened. What? I asked, drawn into his story despite my confusion. A king found his true mate. Not a political alliance, not a union for strength or beauty, but a soul connection that transcended the physical world. His eyes met mine, intense and searching. Their bond was so powerful it united warring packs and ushered in centuries of peace. The weight of his implication hung in the air between us. You can't possibly think that we— I know exactly what we are, Alara, he interrupted, his certainty unnerving. I've known since the moment you stepped from behind that tree. That's impossible. We've never met before tonight, haven't we? He reached out, his fingers hovering near my cheek without touching. Dreams, perhaps. Glimpses at the edge of sleep. A chill ran down my spine. For years I'd experienced vivid dreams of running through unfamiliar forests, of Arctic eyes watching from the darkness, of a presence that should have terrified me but instead felt like coming home. I'd never told anyone about these dreams, convinced they were just the desperate fantasies of a lonely girl. How could you know about that? I whispered. Because I've dreamed of you too. Your hair like moonlight, your courage, your solitude. He circled me slowly, his presence enveloping me like a physical thing. 5 centuries, Alara, that's how long I've been searching for you. My breath caught. That's not possible. You're not much older than 30. His laugh was without humor. My physical form, perhaps. My soul is far older. Madness. This was madness. Yet something deep within me resonated with his words, like a string plucked to produce a perfect note. The pendant, he continued, belonged to the mate of the last Alpha King, who performed the ceremony under a blood moon. When she died, her spirit was bound to it, waiting to be reborn when the stars aligned again. His eyes dropped to the silver crescent. Your mother was its guardian, meant to pass it to the one who would complete the cycle. My mother never told me any of this. Perhaps she didn't know the full story. Or perhaps she hoped to protect you from your destiny. His expression softened. Destiny can be a heavy burden, especially for one who has already carried so much. The kindness in his voice, the first genuine kindness I'd experienced in years, threatened to unravel me. I turned away, blinking back unexpected tears. Even if I believed this fairy tale, I said once I'd composed myself, it doesn't explain why you would want a mate who can't shift. An Alpha King needs strength beside him. Not what? Intelligence? Compassion? Resilience? He moved to stand before me again. You've survived years of cruelty without becoming cruel yourself. You've maintained your humanity in a world that despised you for it. That is a different kind of strength, Alara. One far rarer than the ability to grow fur and fangs. His words touched something vulnerable inside me, a desperate hope I'd buried long ago. Pretty speeches don't change reality. Your court will never accept a half-blood queen who can't shift. They will accept what I command them to accept, he stated with absolute confidence. Besides, who said you can't shift? Before I could respond, howls erupted from the forest. Not the familiar calls of our pack, but something deeper, wilder. Evander tilted his head, listening. My royal guard grows impatient, he explained. They're not accustomed to being dismissed during important ceremonies. There are more of you here? A foolish question. Of course, an Alpha King wouldn't travel alone. 7 of my most trusted warriors. They've been patrolling the perimeter of your territory. He offered his arm to me. Would you like to meet them? I hesitated, overwhelmed by the night's events. I don't think I'm ready to face more wolves who will judge me for what I lack. His expression darkened. No member of my court would dare judge you, Alara, but I understand your hesitation. He dropped his arm. We can remain here until you're more comfortable. The consideration in his voice, the way he immediately respected my boundaries without question, surprised me. It shouldn't have been remarkable, but after years of having my wishes dismissed, it felt revolutionary. Why me? I asked again, needing something more concrete than talk of destiny and ancient magic. The truth, please. Evander was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying the blood moon that now hung like a ruby in the night sky. In 5 centuries of existence, he finally said, you are the only one who has ever made me feel complete. He turned those Arctic eyes back to me. The only one who quiets the beast that has raged inside me for centuries. How is that possible when we've only just met? Some souls recognize each other instantly. The moment you stepped into the torchlight, everything in me stilled. His voice lowered. For the first time in 500 years, the hunger inside me subsided. There was raw honesty in his words that I couldn't deny, a vulnerability beneath his power that called to something equally vulnerable in me. I've spent my life being unwanted, I admitted, my voice barely audible, being claimed so publicly by someone like you. It feels like a dream I'll wake from at any moment. Not a dream, he said softly. A beginning. He held out his hand, palm up, an invitation rather than a demand. After a moment's hesitation, I placed my hand in his. The contact sent warmth spiraling up my arm, a sensation so unlike the electric shock of our first touch that I gasped. What was that? I asked. The beginning of a bond, he explained. It will grow stronger with time and proximity. And the implications of his words, that we would have time together, a future, both thrilled and terrified me. A twig snapped in the forest beyond the clearing. Evander's posture changed instantly, his body shifting to shield mine as he scanned the darkness. "We're not alone," he murmured, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. My pulse quickened. My stepmother? No. Something else. He inhaled deeply. Something that doesn't belong here. The torches surrounding the clearing flickered, though there was no wind. The temperature seemed to drop suddenly, frost crystallizing on the grass at our feet, despite the summer night. "What's happening?" I whispered, instinctively moving closer to him. "The blood moon awakens many things," Evander replied, his eyes never ceasing their vigilant scan. Not all of them benevolent. A shadow detached itself from the tree line, too large and misshapen to be a wolf. It moved with unnatural fluidity, as though it had too many limbs or none at all. "Stay behind me," Evander ordered, his voice allowing no argument. For once, I had no desire to disobey. The wrongness of the approaching shadow sent primal fear coursing through me. "What is that thing?" I breathed against his back. "A void walker, a creature that exists in the spaces between worlds." His muscles tensed beneath my hands. "They can only cross over during cosmic events like the blood moon. They feed on potential, on futures not yet realized." The shadow stopped at the edge of the torchlight, its form shifting and writhing like smoke given partial substance. Where a face should have been, there was only deeper darkness, a void that hurt my eyes to look at directly. "It's come for us," Evander continued, his voice tight. "For what we represent." "Which is what, exactly?" I asked, fear making my voice sharp. "Change. Power. The fulfillment of an ancient cycle." He reached back to grasp my hand. "It's drawn to the pendant, to the magic awakening within you." As if in response to his words, my mother's pendant grew warm against my skin again, pulsing in time with my racing heart. The shadow creature made a sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whisper, that seemed to bypass my ears and slither directly into my mind. "The half-blood carries what is not hers to bear," it seemed to say, though no words were actually spoken. "We have come to correct this imbalance." "We?" Evander tensed further. "How many of you crossed over?" The creature's form rippled, and I had the distinct impression it was laughing. "Enough to ensure the cycle remains broken. Enough to feast on your failure." Evander's grip on my hand tightened. "Run," he whispered urgently. "To the altar, now. I'm not leaving you. Trust me, Alara." He turned just enough for me to see his profile, the intensity in his eyes. "Please." That single word, "please," from the lips of an alpha king decided me. I broke away and ran toward the stone altar at the center of the clearing, my heart pounding against my ribs. Behind me, I heard fabric tearing, followed by the unmistakable sound of bones cracking and reforming. I glanced back to see Evander's human form blurring, changing, growing into something massive and terrifying. His wolf was unlike any I'd ever seen, twice the size of a normal alpha, with fur as black as midnight except for a streak of silver running from between his eyes to the base of his neck. His transformed eyes remained the same unnatural pale blue, glowing with power in the darkness. As the shadow creature lunged forward, Evander met it with fang and claw, his roar shaking the very air around us. The torches flared higher, as though responding to his rage. I reached the altar and turned, watching the battle unfold with a mixture of terror and awe. Evander moved with impossible speed and grace, tearing into the creature despite its insubstantial form. Where his claws connected, the shadow seemed to solidify momentarily, dark ichor spraying across the grass. But the creature was fast too, its limbs extending and reshaping to attack from multiple angles. One tendril of darkness lashed across Evander's flank, leaving a smoking wound that made him snarl in pain. "Evander!" I cried out, my hands gripping the edge of the stone altar. At the sound of my voice, both Evander and the creature turned toward me. In that moment, I felt the pendant against my skin grow hot enough to burn, its silver surface beginning to glow with an inner light that matched the color of the blood moon above. The shadow creature's attention shifted fully to me, drawn by the pendant's crimson glow. It abandoned its fight with Evander and surged toward the altar, moving with unnatural speed. The vessel awakens. Its voice slithered through my mind. How inconvenient. Evander launched himself between us, massive jaws snapping at the creature, but one of its shadowy tendrils slipped past him and reached for me, for the glowing pendant at my throat. Instinct took over. I pressed my palm against the burning silver, embracing the pain rather than pulling away. The pendant's glow intensified, bleeding through my fingers and casting ruby light across the altar's ancient surface. The symbols carved into the stone began to illuminate in response, creating a perfect circle of crimson sigils around me. The shadow creature recoiled with a sound like tearing silk. The old magic stirs. This cannot be permitted. More shadows peeled away from the forest, drawn by our conflict, or perhaps called by the first creature. 3, then 5, then a dozen formless entities surrounding the clearing, pressing against the boundary created by the torchlight. Evander backed toward the altar, his massive wolf form positioning itself protectively before me. Blood matted the fur along his flank where the creature had struck him, but his stance remained strong, defiant. "You cannot protect her from all of us, Ancient One," the shadow voices chorused in my mind. The cycle ends tonight. The pendant pulsed against my palm, each beat sending waves of heat through my body. With it came flashes of memory, not my own, but vivid nonetheless. A woman with my face but dressed in clothes from centuries past. The same pendant around her throat, a wolf with arctic eyes watching over her. Blood on snow. A promise made in death. "I don't understand," I whispered, overwhelmed by these fractured visions. Evander growled, the sound rumbling through the clearing like distant thunder. The shadows hesitated, but only briefly. They began to circle, searching for weakness, for an opening in our defenses. "What do they want?" I called to Evander, unsure if he could understand me in this form or respond. To my surprise, his voice filled my mind, as clear as if he'd spoken aloud. "They want what they've always wanted, to prevent the union of true mates, to keep the packs divided and weak." I startled at the mental connection, nearly pulling my hand away from the pendant. "The pendant allows us to communicate," he explained. "It bridges more than just worlds." "True mates," I repeated, testing the ancient term I'd heard only in pack legends. "That's what you think we are? It's what I know we are, what they know as well, or they wouldn't have crossed over to stop us." One of the shadow creatures launched itself forward, testing Evander's guard. He met it with savage fury, tearing into its form until it retreated, diminished. "I cannot fight them all," he admitted, his mental voice strained. "Not while protecting you, and my royal guard cannot reach us. The Void Walkers have sealed the clearing." "Then tell me what to do," I said, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "How do I help?" "The pendant. Your mother passed it to you because only you can unleash its full power." "How?" "I don't know how to use magic. I can't even shift, because you've been trying to access wolf magic," he explained urgently as 2 more shadows darted forward, forcing him to leap into battle again. "But your power doesn't come from the wolf alone. It comes from being what they fear most, the perfect balance of human and wolf." The pendant burned hotter against my skin, and with it came another flash of memory. A circle of women standing around this very altar, passing the pendant from hand to hand, each adding her power to it before passing it to the next generation. Understanding dawned. It's not just a pendant. It's a reservoir of power, of female power. Yes, the magic of the lunar priestesses, women who guided the packs before Alpha Kings existed. Their line was thought extinct until you. The revelation should have seemed absurd, yet it resonated with truth. I'd always felt different, set apart, not just because of my half-blood status, but because of a deeper otherness I couldn't name. "What do I do?" I asked, watching as more shadows pressed inward, forcing Evander to fight on multiple fronts. "Complete the circle. Accept your heritage. Claim your power." 3 shadow creatures converged on Evander simultaneously. Though he fought with incredible strength, One slipped past his defenses and clawed deep into his shoulder, drawing a pained howl from his massive chest. Seeing him injured ignited something primal within me, a protective rage I'd never experienced before. The pendant's heat spread throughout my body, no longer painful but empowering, filling me with liquid fire. I placed both hands on the altar, feeling the ancient stone vibrate beneath my touch. The carved symbols responded immediately, their glow intensifying until the entire altar blazed with crimson light. Words rose to my lips, words I'd never learned yet somehow knew, in a language older than the pacts themselves. As I spoke them, the light from the altar shot upward in a column that connected to the blood moon above, creating a perfect bridge between earth and sky. The shadow creatures shrieked, their forms wavering at the edges as they retreated from the expanding circle of light. Yes, Evander's voice filled my mind, triumphant despite his pain. Keep going, Ilara. Power coursed through me, foreign yet familiar, like returning to a home I'd never known I had. The pendant lifted from my chest, suspended in the air before me, spinning slowly as its glow matched the intensity of the altar and moon. The final words of the incantation tore from my throat in a voice that wasn't entirely my own. Deeper, older, layered with the echoes of women who had stood where I stood centuries before. As the last syllable fell from my lips, the pendant shattered. For one terrible moment, I thought I'd failed. Then the fragments of silver expanded outward, transforming into thousands of moonlit shards that hung suspended in the air around the altar. Each contained a fragment of the crimson light. Each pulsed with the same rhythm as my heart. "Daughters of the moon," I called out, the words coming from some ancestral memory. "Lend me your strength." The shards responded, swirling around me faster and faster, until they formed a tornado of light with me at its center. Through this veil, I could see the shadow creatures cowering back, their formless bodies seeming to dissolve where the light touched them. Evander stood his ground, his massive wolf form bathed in the crimson glow, his eyes locked with mine, filled with a mixture of awe and pride that made my heart swell. With a gesture that felt as natural as breathing, I directed the swirling shards toward the shadow creatures. The light cut through their darkness like countless tiny blades, each contact producing a sound like ice cracking on a frozen lake. The shadows wailed, their voices a cacophony of rage and fear in my mind as they tried to flee. But the shards pursued relentlessly, guided by my will, by the combined power of generations of lunar priestesses flowing through me. One by one, the void walkers were pierced by the light, their darkness fragmenting and dissolving into the night air. As each fell, I felt the pendant's power diminishing, the shards growing fewer and dimmer. When the last shadow creature had been banished, the remaining shards spiraled back toward me, reforming the crescent pendant around my neck. The metal was no longer silver, but a strange, luminous material that seemed to contain galaxies within its depths. The column of light connecting the altar to the blood moon pulsed once more, then slowly faded. The carved symbols ceased their glow, returning to weathered stone. The torches around the clearing burned normally again. Exhaustion hit me like a physical blow. My legs buckled, and I would have fallen if not for Evander, who had shifted back to human form and caught me in his arms. He'd somehow acquired a cloak to cover himself, though it did little to hide the wounds on his shoulder and side. "You did it," he murmured, his voice rough with pain and pride. "You banished them all." What just happened?" I asked, my own voice barely a whisper as fatigue settled deep into my bones. "You claimed your birthright," he said, helping me sit on the edge of the altar. The lunar priestesses were the counterbalance to alpha power, wisdom to temper strength, compassion to guide savagery. Their line was thought lost centuries ago. I touched the transformed pendant at my throat. My mother never told me. She may not have known the full truth herself. The knowledge was fragmented, passed down in pieces to protect it. His fingers brushed mine where they rested on the pendant. But the blood moon remembers, and so does the magic in your blood. The clearing was suddenly filled with the sound of running feet and urgent voices. 7 enormous wolves burst through the tree line, their fur in various shades of gray, brown, and black, their eyes glowing with power and concern. "My royal guard," Evander explained, straightening despite his wounds. They finally broke through the barrier. The wolves approached cautiously, their massive heads bowed in deference to their king. One, a wolf with silver-tipped gray fur, moved closer than the others, his intelligent eyes taking in Evander's injuries with obvious concern. "I'm fine, Rowan," Evander said to the gray wolf, thanks to her. 7 pairs of eyes turned to me, not with the contempt or pity I was accustomed to from pack wolves, but with something like awe. The gray wolf, Rowan, approached slowly, and to my shock, lowered his massive body to the ground before me in a gesture of profound respect. One by one, the other wolves followed suit, until all 7 members of the royal guard were bowing to the half-blood girl they'd just met. "They recognize what you are," Evander said softly, "what you've always been beneath the surface. The first lunar priestess to be born in 5 centuries. The revelation was too enormous to process in my exhausted state. I still don't understand how this is possible, or what it means." "It means you are exactly who I need beside me," Evander replied, his hand finding mine again. "Not just as my mate, but as the balance to my rule. The packs have been governed by strength alone for too long. They need the wisdom of the lunar priestesses again." The gray wolf, Rowan, shifted forms, revealing a man perhaps a few years older than Evander, with the same silver-tipped hair as his wolf. Unlike Evander, he seemed unconcerned with his nudity as he approached and knelt before us. "Your Majesties," he said, his voice deep and respectful. "The perimeter is secure, but we should not linger. The Blood Moon's power will soon wane, and with it, the protection it offers." Evander nodded. "Prepare to depart immediately. We'll return to the royal territory before dawn." Reality crashed back into my consciousness. "Wait, return? You expect me to leave? Just like that?" "Of course," Evander said, looking surprised by my hesitation. "You belong at my side now, at the royal palace. I can't just abandon my life here," I protested. Though even as I spoke, I realized there was little holding me to this place beyond familiarity. No loving family, no close friends, no purpose. Evander's expression softened. "Is there someone or something that keeps you here, Alara? If so, tell me, and we will make arrangements." I thought of my father, long dead, of the small garden behind our cottage where I'd planted herbs and flowers that thrived under my care, of the forest paths I walked in solitude. Small things, insignificant against the magnitude of what Evander offered, yet they were mine. "I just need time," I said finally. "This is all happening so fast," understanding dawned in his eyes. "Of course. Forgive me. I've waited centuries for you. I forget that you've had only hours to adjust to these revelations." Rowan cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, while I understand the need for sensitivity, we must consider security. The Void Walkers may have been banished, but their allies in this realm might still pose a threat." "Allies?" I asked, alarmed. "You mean there are creatures here who work with those shadow things?" "Not creatures," Evander said grimly. "People. Wolves who benefit from keeping the packs divided, who profit from conflict and chaos." A chill ran down my spine as I thought of my stepmother's rage, of Mara's hatred. "My family, would they harm you out of spite?" Evander asked directly. I wanted to deny it, to believe better of them, but the memory of years of cruelty stopped the words in my throat. They've never been physically violent. But tonight, I've never seen my stepmother so angry. Evander's jaw tightened. "Then you will not return to their house, not even to collect your belongings." "But I will provide everything you need," he insisted, his tone brooking no argument. "Your safety is paramount." Part of me bristled at being told what to do, at having choices made for me, even by a man who claimed to be my destined mate. Another part, the part that had endured years of subtle and not so subtle abuse, recognized the protective instinct behind his words. "A compromise," I suggested, finding my voice. "I don't return to my stepmother's house, but I don't leave for the royal palace tonight either. I need at least a day to process everything that's happened, to say goodbye to this life before starting a new one." Evander studied me, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he nodded. "One day. But not here. Not in your pack territory where those who wish you harm can reach you." "Where then?" "There's a sanctuary at the border of your territory. Rowan suggested, looking to Evander. The old temple by the waterfall, sacred ground, protected. I know that place, I said, surprised. I used to go there to be alone, to think. Evander's eyebrows rose. You were drawn to the ancient temple of the lunar priestesses without knowing what it was. The blood calls to blood, it seems. He turned to Rowan. Make the arrangements. 4 guards at all times, rotating shifts. No one enters except by my direct order. Wait, I interrupted. You're not staying with me? Something flashed in Evander's eyes, hunger, quickly controlled. If I stay with you, alone, for a full day and night. He let the implication hang in the air between us. Heat rose to my cheeks as I understood. The mating bond, still forming between us, would push for completion, physical completion. Oh, I said, suddenly flustered. Besides, he continued more practically, I have matters to attend to. Your former Pack Alpha must be informed of your new status, arrangements must be made for your official presentation at court, and your wounds need tending, Rowan added pointedly. Evander waved this away as if his injuries were inconsequential. I'll return for you at moonrise tomorrow. Will that give you sufficient time? I nodded, though in truth, I doubted a lifetime would be enough to fully comprehend the changes this night had brought. Yes, thank you. He reached out, his fingers gently tilting my chin upward until our eyes met. Do not thank me for respecting your wishes, Alara. That is the bare minimum you should expect from your mate. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, made my throat tighten with emotion. How strange to have my feelings considered, my needs acknowledged, after so many years of the opposite. The remaining royal guards had shifted back to human form and were conferring in low voices, occasionally glancing our way. All were clearly warriors, their bodies bearing the evidence of past battles in the form of scars, and a watchful readiness that never fully abated. They'll protect you with their lives, Evander said, following my gaze. You'll come to know them as family in time. Family. The word evoked a longing so profound it was almost painful. I'd like that. Rowan approached again, having wrapped a cloak around his waist for modesty. Everything is prepared, your majesties. 2 guards will escort the queen to the sanctuary immediately. The others will secure the perimeter and establish a patrol rotation. Queen. Another title that didn't feel real, that couldn't possibly apply to me. Yet the way Rowan said it, with genuine respect rather than the mockery I'd feared, made it slightly easier to bear. Evander stood, extending his hand to help me rise from the altar. As I took it, our palms pressed together, and a current of warmth flowed between us, stronger than before. The sensation spread up my arm and throughout my body, settling in my chest like a small sun. The bond grows, he murmured, his eyes darkening slightly. By tomorrow night it will be challenging to resist. Is that why you're sending me away with guards? To protect me from yourself? I asked, half joking. His expression remained serious. Yes. Until you are fully ready, until you choose completion of your own free will, I will keep my distance, no matter how difficult. The promise, for it was clearly that, touched me deeply. For a man with his power to restrain himself out of respect for my autonomy, spoke volumes about his character. Thank you, I said softly. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. Unlike the formal gesture during the ceremony, this was intimate, his lips lingering against my skin, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Until tomorrow, my queen, he whispered against my hand. Until tomorrow, I echoed, my voice steadier than I felt. As 2 of the royal guards approached to escort me to the sanctuary, I glanced back at Evander one last time. He stood tall despite his injuries, the blood moon casting him in crimson light, his eyes following me with a longing so palpable it was almost a physical touch. In that moment, standing at the threshold between my old life and whatever extraordinary future awaited, I felt a certainty bloom within me. Wherever this path led, whatever challenges it presented, I would not walk it alone, not ever again. The sanctuary by the waterfall was exactly as I remembered it. A circular stone structure, partially reclaimed by nature, with vines climbing its ancient columns and moonlight filtering through the broken dome above. What I hadn't noticed in my previous visits were the symbols carved into the walls. The same symbols that had illuminated on the altar during the ceremony. This really was their temple, I murmured, trailing my fingers over the weathered carvings. The lunar priestesses. One of my guards, a lean, watchful woman named Sylvia with amber eyes and a scar across her throat, nodded. The oldest temple in all 5 territories, built before the packs were divided, when wolves and humans still lived in harmony. You know the history? I asked, surprised. The royal guard serves more than just the Alpha King, she replied. We preserve knowledge others would rather forget. Knowledge that has been waiting for someone like you to return. The other guard, a massive man called Cain, whose silence suggested he spoke only when absolutely necessary, had busied himself securing the perimeter, checking the ancient stones for weaknesses, establishing patrol routes with the 2 guards stationed outside. I wandered deeper into the temple, drawn to a pool of clear water at its center, fed by a small stream that flowed from the waterfall outside. The surface reflected the blood moon perfectly, creating the illusion of 2 crimson orbs, one above, one below. You should rest, Sylvia suggested, keeping a respectful distance. You've expended considerable power tonight. She was right. Exhaustion weighed on me like a physical burden, making my limbs heavy and my thoughts sluggish. Yet my mind raced too much for sleep. I don't think I can, I admitted. Everything's happening so fast. Sylvia's expression softened slightly. The king told us you might need space to process. We'll keep watch from the outer chamber unless you need us. I appreciated the gesture, the attempt to give me privacy while still ensuring my safety. Thank you. Once alone, I sank down beside the reflecting pool, trailing my fingers through the cool water. The transformed pendant at my throat caught the moonlight, casting rippling patterns across the temple walls. What am I supposed to do now? I whispered to the empty air. How do I become what they all expect me to be? No answer came, of course, only the gentle sound of falling water and the occasional hoot of an owl outside. I must have dozed despite my racing thoughts, for I awakened to pale dawn light filtering through the broken dome. The blood moon had faded with the night, leaving only its echo in the pendant around my neck. Sylvia appeared silently at my side, offering a bundle wrapped in soft cloth. The king sent these before he departed last night. I thought you might want them when you woke. Inside the bundle, I found clean clothing. A simple but beautifully made dress of deep blue, soft leather boots, and undergarments that looked suspiciously close to my size. There was also a silver brush, a small vial of fragrant oil, and a note written in a strong, elegant hand. For my queen, the first of many gifts, though none will ever match the gift of your presence in my life, until moonrise. The thoughtfulness of it, practical items rather than frivolous luxuries, exactly what I needed in this moment, brought an unexpected lump to my throat. There's a bathing pool through that archway, Sylvia mentioned, gesturing to a doorway I hadn't noticed before. Fed by the waterfall, it's quite private. The prospect of washing away the previous night's events was too tempting to resist. I gathered the bundle and made my way to the bathing pool, which turned out to be a natural basin in the stone, deep enough to submerge completely, with steps worn smooth by centuries of use. As I bathed, watching the golden morning light dance across the water's surface, I allowed myself to truly consider what had happened and what was to come. In a single night, I had gone from being the half-blood embarrassment hidden away by her stepmother to the claimed mate of the Alpha King. From a girl with no place or purpose to a lunar priestess with powers I barely understood. It seemed impossible, yet the transformed pendant against my skin and the lingering warmth of the forming bond reminded me it was all too real. What would life be like at the royal palace? Would the court accept me, or would I face the same prejudice and cruelty I'd endured here, simply on a grander scale? And Evander himself, could I truly be what he needed? What if he realized I wasn't the mythical figure he believed me to be, just a lonely, ordinary girl who happened to inherit an extraordinary pendant? These questions circled in my mind as I dressed in the clothes he'd provided. The blue dress fit perfectly, the fabric softer than anything I'd ever worn. The boots were equally comfortable, designed for both beauty and practicality. Even the fragrant oil, when applied to my skin and hair, seemed specially chosen to complement my natural scent, rather than mask it. By the time I emerged, the sun had fully risen, casting the sanctuary in golden light that contrasted sharply with the moonlit magic of the previous night. Cain had been replaced by another guard, a woman with sharp features and vigilant eyes who introduced herself simply as Vera, while Sylvia remained, maintaining a careful watch. "Are you hungry, Your Majesty?" Sylvia asked, the formal address still startling to my ears. Before I could answer, my stomach growled loudly enough for both guards to hear. Heat rose to my cheeks as Sylvia smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. "I'll take that as a yes," she said, retrieving a basket I hadn't noticed before. The king anticipated this as well. The basket contained fresh bread still warm from the oven, ripe berries, hard cheese, and smoked meat, simple fare but of excellent quality. There was also a flask of sweet berry wine that tasted of summer sunshine. As I ate, sitting cross-legged by the reflecting pool, Sylvia kept me company while Vera patrolled the outer chambers. Something about the guard's steady presence made it easy to voice the questions that had been plaguing me. "What is he like?" I asked suddenly, "when he's not being kingly?" Sylvia considered the question carefully. "Thoughtful, deliberate. He carries the weight of 5 centuries and 5 territories without complaint. But those who serve him closest see the toll it takes." She glanced at me. "He's been alone a very long time, Your Majesty." "Please, when we're private like this, call me Alara," I requested. "I'm not used to titles yet." She inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Alara, then. The king is fair, but firm. He remembers every slight, but forgives those who prove themselves worthy of second chances. He has never abused his power, though there have been countless opportunities." "And as a mate?" I asked, the words still strange on my tongue. A knowing look crossed Sylvia's face. "That I cannot tell you. In 5 centuries he has taken no lovers, formed no attachments. The royal guard has been his only family." She paused. "Until now." The weight of that revelation, 500 years of solitude, was staggering. "Why?" "Surely there have been women who—" "Many," Sylvia confirmed. "Beautiful, powerful, politically advantageous. He rejected them all. He was waiting, he said, for the one who would make him feel whole again." I remembered his words from the previous night. "You are the only one who has ever made me feel complete." The responsibility of that statement, of being the answer to 5 centuries of loneliness, was terrifying. "What if I'm not what he thinks I am?" I whispered, voicing my deepest fear. "What if I disappoint him?" Sylvia's expression softened again. "The king sees people as they truly are, not just their appearance or abilities, but their hearts. If he chose you, it was not based on illusion or fantasy." Her words offered some comfort, but doubt still lingered. I was, after all, the same half-blood girl I'd been yesterday. The same girl who'd spent her life being told she wasn't enough. The day passed slowly, measured in the gradual shift of sunlight across the temple floor. I explored the sanctuary more thoroughly, discovering ancient texts written in a language I couldn't read, but somehow understood the meaning of, and small niches that once held offerings to the moon. Sylvia answered my questions about the royal territories, the structure of the court, the duties I might be expected to perform as queen. As sunset approached, my anxiety returned tenfold. I paced the inner chamber, unable to settle, touching the pendant repeatedly for reassurance. "He's coming," Vyra announced suddenly from her position near the entrance. "The king approaches with his escort." My heart leaped into my throat. "Already? But the sun hasn't fully set." "He's eager," Sylvia observed with the faintest hint of amusement. I smoothed my dress with trembling hands, suddenly conscious of my appearance in a way I'd never been before. "Do I look acceptable?" Sylvia's eyes softened. "You look like a queen, Alara. You're queen. Not anyone else's idea of one." Before I could respond, a ripple of energy passed through the sanctuary, the unmistakable presence of an alpha in his prime. My pendant warmed against my skin, responding to his proximity as if greeting an old friend. And then he was there, filling the arched entrance with his presence. Evander had exchanged his ceremonial black cloak for more practical attire: dark pants, a charcoal tunic open at the throat, and a shorter cloak that did nothing to diminish his regal bearing. His wounds from the previous night were barely visible, already healing with preternatural speed. His arctic eyes found mine immediately, warming with an intensity that made breathing difficult. For a moment neither of us spoke, the connection between us vibrating like a plucked string. "Ilara," he said finally, my name on his lips sounding like both greeting and prayer. "Your Majesty," I responded automatically, then flushed at the formality. A smile touched the corners of his mouth. "I think we're well past such formalities, don't you?" His royal guard and mine exchanged knowing glances before discreetly withdrawing to the outer chambers, leaving us alone in the heart of the sanctuary. Evander approached slowly, his movements measured as if concerned about startling me. "How was your day of reflection? Illuminating?" I answered honestly. "Terrifying. Overwhelming." He stopped before me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body but not touching. "And what conclusion did you reach?" I met his gaze directly. "That I have no idea how to be what everyone expects me to be. A queen. A priestess. Your mate. I don't expect you to be anything but yourself, Ilara," he said softly. "The rest will come with time. Easy for you to say. You've had centuries to perfect being royal." His laugh was unexpected, rich and genuine, transforming his severe features. "Perfect? Hardly. I've made more mistakes than you can imagine. The difference is that I've had time to learn from them." His expression sobered. "Time is the one thing I can give you in abundance. We need not rush." The consideration in his voice, the patience he offered when he could have simply commanded, continued to surprise me. "Why are you so different from what I expected?" "And what did you expect from an Alpha King?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Arrogance, domination, someone who takes what he wants without question." His eyes darkened slightly. "There are certainly alphas who behave that way. I've killed more than a few of them over the centuries for abusing their power." He stepped closer, his voice lowering. "Make no mistake, Ilara. I am every bit as dominant, as possessive, as my nature demands. But true power lies in control, in knowing when to exercise authority and when to yield." The intensity of his gaze made heat pool low in my abdomen. "And with me? Will you exercise authority or yield?" "Both," he said simply. "As needed." "As desired." His hand lifted, hovering near my cheek without touching. "May I?" The request for permission, so contrary to everything I'd been taught about alphas, undid me. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. His fingers brushed my cheek with exquisite gentleness, trailing down to trace the line of my jaw. The bond between us flared at the contact, warmth spreading from the point of connection throughout my body. "The bond strengthens," he murmured. "Can you feel it?" "Yes," I whispered, leaning slightly into his touch. "What exactly is it? This connection between us? Many things. A recognition of compatible souls. A bridge between minds. Eventually a sharing of strength and power." His thumb brushed across my lower lip, sending shivers down my spine. "In time, if you choose it, much more." The implication hung in the air between us, weighted with possibilities I wasn't ready to examine too closely. I stepped back slightly, needing distance to think clearly. "You said I had until moonrise to decide whether to return with you to the royal palace." Disappointment flickered across his features at the loss of contact, but he nodded. "That was our agreement. Before I decide, I need honesty. Complete honesty." I gathered my courage. "What happens if I say no? If I'm not ready to leave with you tonight?" The question clearly pained him, but he answered without hesitation. "Then I would respect your decision, provide protection for you here or wherever you wish to go, give you the time you need, even if it meant waiting longer, after you've already waited centuries. Even then." His certainty was absolute. "I would not force this, Ilara. Not for anything." "And the bond? Would it fade if I chose to walk away?" A shadow crossed his face. "No. It would remain, incomplete, but present, for both of us. A constant reminder of what could have been." The thought of carrying such a bond, feeling its pull without fulfillment, seemed unbearably cruel. You would subject yourself to that for my freedom of choice? Yes. No hesitation, no qualification, just simple truth. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about Evander, about the man beneath the crown, beneath the centuries of power and solitude. He was, at his core, honorable in a way few ever achieve. He wielded his immense power with restraint not because he had to, but because he chose to. I have one more question, I said, my voice steadier now. Anything. What do you see when you look at me? Not what I represent or what power I might have, but me, just Alara. Evander's expression softened, vulnerability showing through his regal facade. I see a woman who endured years of cruelty without becoming cruel, who remained compassionate when she had every reason to harden her heart, who faced shadow creatures and ancient magic with more courage than warriors twice her size. His voice lowered to a near whisper. I see the other half of my soul, Ilara, the part I've been missing for 500 years. His words stripped away my remaining defenses. The raw honesty in his voice, the depth of emotion in his eyes, these couldn't be fabricated or manipulated. Whatever else might be uncertain, his feelings for me were real. I'll come with you, I said quietly. To the royal palace, to your home. The joy that transformed his face was like watching dawn break after the longest night, gradual at first, then radiant. Our home, he corrected gently. Before I could respond, he closed the distance between us and cradled my face in his hands. May I kiss you, Ilara, not as king to queen or alpha to mate, but as a man who has waited lifetimes to find you. My breath caught at the tenderness in his request. Yes, I whispered. His lips met mine with gentle restraint, a kiss that asked rather than demanded. The contact sent the bond between us surging like a river breaking through ice in spring, warm and powerful and unstoppable. My hands found their way to his chest, feeling his heart thundering beneath my palm. When he finally pulled back, his eyes had darkened to the color of a winter sky before storm, pupils dilated with barely controlled desire. The pendant at my throat pulsed in time with my racing heart, casting a soft glow between us. We should go, he said, his voice rougher than before. Before I forget my promises about patience and time, the naked want in his expression sent heat cascading through me. Part of me, a part I barely recognized, wanted to tell him to forget those promises, to give in to the hunger building between us. But the rational remainder knew he was right. We had time. There was no need to rush what promised to be extraordinary. Yes, I agreed, reluctantly stepping back. We should go. He offered me his arm, every inch the king despite the desire still evident in his eyes. Your royal guard awaits, my queen, and beyond them, a new life. As I placed my hand on his arm, the contact even threw cloth-sending warmth spiraling up my limb. I thought of how drastically my world had changed in the space of a day and night. From hidden away and unwanted to claimed and cherished, from powerless to powerful. I'm afraid, I admitted as we walked toward the sanctuary entrance, where our guards waited, of failing, of not being enough. Evander paused, turning to face me fully. Fear is natural when facing the unknown. But remember this, Ilara. You were born for this role, this life, this purpose. The blood of lunar priestesses flows in your veins. The power that banished the Voidwalkers comes from within you, not just from the pendant. And if I make mistakes, his smile was gentle, then we will face the consequences together and learn from them. I have made countless errors in 5 centuries, yet here I stand. Outside the sanctuary, the guards stood at attention, their faces carefully neutral despite the obvious curiosity in their eyes. The sky had deepened to indigo, stars beginning to appear like scattered diamonds, though the moon had not yet risen. 3 massive black horses waited nearby, their size matching their riders' supernatural stature. A 4th, smaller, with a coat the color of pale moonlight, stood apart from the others. A gift, Evander said, following my gaze to the white mare. Her name is Luna. I thought it fitting. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, selecting a mount that matched my coloring rather than his, choosing a gentler animal suitable for someone with my limited experience, touched me deeply. "Thank you," I said, reaching out to stroke the mare's velvety nose. She nuzzled my palm affectionately, as if we were already old friends. Evander helped me mount, his hands lingering at my waist longer than strictly necessary. The contact sent another rush of warmth through the forming bond. "The royal territory is a half-day's ride from here," he explained, as he mounted his own stallion, a beast so black he seemed to absorb the fading light. "We'll travel through the night and arrive by dawn." As our small procession moved away from the sanctuary, I glanced back one last time at the ancient temple, at the place where I'd spent my last hours as simply Alara, the half-blood nobody. By the time I saw it again, I would be transformed, just as my mother's pendant had been. We rode in comfortable silence for a time, the guards giving us space while maintaining a protective perimeter. The forest at night should have been frightening, but with Evander beside me and the pendant warm against my skin, I felt only a strange sense of homecoming. "What happens when we reach the royal palace?" I asked eventually. "Will there be some formal ceremony? An announcement?" "There will be formalities, yes," Evander confirmed. "A presentation to the court, a formal acknowledgement of our bond. Eventually, a coronation." He glanced at me, reading the apprehension on my face. "But first, there will be time for you to settle in, to learn your new home, to adjust. Will they accept me? The court? The other packs?" The question that had been gnawing at me since the claiming spilled out. A half-blood queen isn't exactly traditional. Evander's expression hardened slightly. "They will accept you because I command it. In time, they will respect you for your own power and wisdom." His features softened again. "Some already do. Word of what happened at the ceremony, of how you banished the Void Walkers, has spread through all 5 territories. So quickly? News of such significance travels faster than any messenger. By now, there are probably a dozen different versions of the story, each more dramatic than the last." A smile touched his lips, though I doubt any could be more extraordinary than the truth. As we crested a hill, the trees thinned, revealing a breathtaking view of the territories spread out below. Forests and meadows, rivers and lakes, all bathed in starlight. In the far distance, barely visible on the horizon, rose the spires of what could only be the royal palace. "Home," Evander said, a wealth of emotion in that single word. I studied the distant castle, trying to imagine it as my home, trying to picture myself walking its halls, sleeping in its chambers, ruling beside this extraordinary man. Will I ever feel like I belong there? I wondered aloud. Evander reached across the space between our horses to take my hand. "You've spent your life being told where you don't belong, Alara. Perhaps it's time to discover where you do." As if in response to his words, the moon began to rise behind us, no longer the blood-red orb of the previous night, but a perfect silver crescent that matched the pendant at my throat. Its light bathed us in gentle radiance, turning the forest path ahead to silver. "Look," Evander said softly. "The moon lights our way forward, an auspicious sign for a new beginning." I turned to face him, this alpha king who had claimed me yet asked for nothing I wasn't ready to give. This ancient soul who had waited centuries for me. This man who looked at me and saw not what I lacked, but what I offered. "A new beginning," I echoed, the words feeling right on my tongue, for both of us. As we continued our journey toward the royal palace, toward our future, the crescent moon rose higher, casting its gentle light on the path ahead. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hidden in shadows or pushed to the periphery. I rode in the light, beside the most powerful alpha in 5 territories, wearing a pendant that marked me as something rare and valuable. The half-blood girl my stepmother had hidden away no longer existed. In her place rode a queen in the making, a lunar priestess rediscovered, a woman claimed but not conquered, chosen, cherished, and finally, after a lifetime of loneliness, exactly where she was meant to be.